Do you remember the story of Moses? If we look back in Exodus, Moses is a man who was raised up in an Egyptian palace. He's raised up as royalty, and through a series of events, he ends up in the backside of nowhere in the middle of the wilderness, raising sheep, and he has this experience with God at a burning bush. He and God begin a debate as God begins to call him to do something supernatural, to be the leader of a revolution. And they're arguing back and forth, and Moses is giving all the reasons why he can't do what God had called him to do, and Moses is interrupted by God, and God looks at him and says, "Hey, Moses, what's in your hand?" Moses says, "Well, it's a rod." And we find that it's that rod that over and over and over Moses uses to demonstrate the power of God as God begins to move in his life. Here in the Hub City family, we are on a mission to help people develop a real devotional life, experience real community, and take steps toward taking a real responsibility for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we want to talk about the thread that ties all three of those together and remind you that you may already have everything you need to do what God's called you to do. If we look at the early church, there was a man by the name of Saul who felt it was his calling, it was his purpose in life to stop the movement of Christianity. He was stoning Christians. He was placing them in prison. He had a letter from the government saying that he could do all these things. And as he traveled around looking for Christians to suppress and to imprison and ultimately kill, he had an encounter with God one day that resulted in him laying flat on his back, blind from the light that was shining from heaven. And it was in that moment that this man Saul goes to Paul as God says, "I've called you to reach an entire people group. I've called you to preach the gospel." As the story goes on, we know now that the Apostle Paul became what is probably the greatest missionary that has ever lived. He wrote a large portion of our New Testament. He changed the entire region that he traveled in. He would show up in the synagogues, and he would show up in front of important figures and government rulers and politicians, and he would simply over and over again tell the same story that we see in Acts chapter number 9. All through the book of Acts, we see Paul just shows up and he tells a story. He even told us, "I don't preach with enticing words and eloquence and wisdom." He said, "But I just preach my life, and the power of God that has changed me begins to change other people." You've got something in common with the greatest missionary this world has ever seen. You've got a story. And it's that story that God wants to use to change the people around you. Sometimes we feel like we have to have this great theological thesis to present. We have to have this eloquent step-by-step Roman road sort of sales pitch that we got to give people. In the day and in the moments that we live in, the most powerful thing that you can share with someone is your story. What's God doing in your life? How's God moving? What's He saying to you? You can share those moments and the things that God is doing in your life, and people's lives will be changed. Hub City family, today we want to encourage you. Share your story with someone. Share what God's doing in your life. It's the common thread that takes the real devotional life and it meets it up with real community, and it brings in the real response to the gospel. All you have to do is share your story. Moses, what's in your hand? You've already got everything you need to do what God's called you to do. Guys, we love you so much. We can't wait to see you in person soon. Until then, believe the best, speak the best, leave somebody better than you found them, and make the goodness of Jesus unavoidable in your city. We love you. See you soon.